All right, everyone. Well, welcome to this third portion of the Theologically Recovering podcast. We have been breaking down the story of Pinocchio. This is part of our series where we're going to go in and take some of the old fables, some of the old fairy tales and archaic stories and cartoons and explain them in such a way that people can become a real person. And that is what this whole series is based on. It's using the story of Pinocchio. It's the quest to become real. And because we know that we've got to move from being a puppet that something else pulls the strings into becoming a real person, what Pinocchio wants to be is be a real boy. What Geppetto wants him to be is to be a real boy. And that's what we want with people. We want people to become real. We want them to get the help that they're needing. So as we've been looking at the story of Pinocchio, we'll recap the first two podcasts. The first one is Geppetto has made this puppet, and he is wanting him to become a real boy. And he looks at it one point, he says he almost looks real. And so that night when he sees the wishing star, his first wish is, or his only wish, is that Pinocchio would become real. And it's kind of a joke as he says it because he doesn't believe it even as he says it. But something happens that night, and the blue fairy comes down and grants his wish. But what he's doing is he's aiming in the right direction. So the first podcast was about getting our direction right, aiming in the right direction, and putting our trust in Christ instead of anything else, and so getting aimed in the right direction. And then when Pinocchio is brought to life, so to speak, he's not fully a real boy, but he's not being pulled by strings anymore. The blue fairy comes down and says, "Little puppet made of pine, awake." And when he gets up, he said, "I can move, I can talk, I can walk." He says, "Am I real?" She says, "Well, no, you're not real yet, but in order to be real, in order to make Geppetto's wish come true," I think is how she says it, "is entirely up to you. In order to do that, you have to be brave, truthful, and unselfish." And so if he'll adopt the responsibility to be brave, truthful, and unselfish, he can make this wish become real. And more than that, it can make Pinocchio not be a wooden puppet, but can make him into something that has purpose and meaning in life. So it speaks to us because if we're going to, in our quest to become real, we have to adopt this responsibility. The next thing we see is, of course, Geppetto wakes up, sees this, he's amazed by it. But the second podcast is when they go to bed, because Geppetto tells him, says, now we got to go to sleep, son. And Pinocchio says, "Why?" And Geppetto says, "Well, everybody has to sleep. Figaro has to sleep, Cleo has to sleep, everybody has to sleep." And says, "Besides, you got a big day tomorrow, and you got school." And he says, "Well, why?" And well, because you got to become smart. And he says, "Well, why?" It's these little naive, childish questions, just like children ask. Well, why? Why? But he asks the why, and it's like Geppetto cannot give him the answer to why. It's like Pinocchio has to live out his questions. So it's we done that whole podcast on that last time. There is some questions in this. You have to ask why, and by asking why, nobody else can give you the answer. You have to ask those and live them out yourself. So the next morning, this is where this podcast is going. This episode is all about. It's the next morning he is heading to school, and so we'll show the clip here and we'll break it down a little bit. Maybe it'll help you.
Oh, wait. Come back here, Figaro. School is not for you.
Goodbye, Father.
Goodbye, son. Hurry back.
Can you listen? The merry laughter of little innocent children wending their way to school. Thirsty little minds rushing to the fountain of knowledge. School, a noble institution. What would this stupid world be without? Well, Stromboli. So that old rascal's back in town, eh? Remember, Giddy, the time I tied strings on you and passed you off as a puppet? We nearly put one over on that old gypsy that time. A little wooden boy. Now, who a wooden boy. Look, Kitty, look. It's amazing. A live puppet without strings. A thing like that ought to be worth a fortune to someone. Now, let me see. That's it! Stromboli! Why, that old faker would give his... Listen. If we play our cards right, we'll be on Easy Street. Or my name is Lawless John. Quick, we let him off. Shh. Now's on. No, stupid. Don't be crude. Let me handle this. Here he comes. Ah, yes, Kitty. As I was saying to the Duchess only yesterday. Oh, how clumsy of me. Oh, my. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Oh, I do hope you're not injured.
I'm all right.
Oh, splendid. Well. Quite a scholar, I see. Look, Kitty, a man of letters. Here's your book.
I'm going to school.
School. Ah, yes. Then you haven't heard of the easy road to success. No? I'm speaking, my boy, of the theater. Is there bright lights, music, applause, fame.
Fame?
Yes, and with that personality, that profile, that physique, why, he's a natural-born actor, eh, Kitty?
But I'm going
Straight to the top. Why, I can see your name in lights 6 feet high. What is your name?
Pinocchio.
Pinocchio. P-I-N-U-O. P-I... We're wasting precious time. Come on to the theater. Hi-diddly-dee. An actor's life for me. A high silk hat and a silver cane. A watch of gold with a diamond chain. Hi-diddly-day. An actor's life is gay. It's great to be a celebrity. An actor's life for me. Turns out the diddy-dum, diddy-up, da-dum, da-dum, diddy-dum, diddy-dum, da-dum, diddy-dum, diddy-dum, da-dum, diddy-dum, diddy-up, diddy-up, da-dum, diddy-dum. An actor's life is fun.
Fine conscience. I turned out to be late the first day. Oh, well, you can't get in much trouble between here and school. Oh, boy, a parade.
An actor's life for me.
Hi, Billy.
An actor's life for me.
Huh?
A wax mustache and a beaver coat, a pony cart and a billy goat.
It's Pinocchio. Hey,
and
where you going?
life is fun.
All right, so the next morning, he's heading to school. Now, what does that represent? He is heading to an institution. He is heading to a place to be around those that are like-minded. And I believe that is important for us because we have to surround ourselves, and we will surround ourselves by people that are like-minded. The addict will surround himself by the addict. The person that's trying to recover needs to surround themselves by other recovering or those that have recovered addicts. The church, Christian people need to surround themselves by other Christians. It's just a principle that we absolutely have to follow. So Pinocchio, on his quest to become real, has to go to school. The first thing Geppetto tells him is, you got a big day, you got to go to sleep because tomorrow you got school. So as he is going to go to school, he is going to be around other children that have the same goal. Now, they may not be the wooden puppets that are trying to become real, but children only mimic what they see. They're not fully real. I mean, they are real in the sense of they are alive, but they are simply being moved and being molded into becoming something real. And so Pinocchio is pretty much in the same boat with those children, but he's heading to school. And I believe that is very important for us to go and be around other people that are like-minded. But on the way to school, he's met with opposition. In the quest to become real, you are going to be met with a whole lot of opposition out there. There is a whole lot of tactics and tricks of Satan that is put in your path that to try to trip you up. The Bible says to put on the whole armor of God that you can stand against the wiles, the tricks, I believe the actual translation is the schemes of the devil. And if we see this, and we do break this down as a Christ-centered addiction recovery group, we see this as a spiritual issue. Then if it's a spiritual issue, then it can only be healed by something that is spiritual. So we realize our need for Christ, and we realize that since we're needing Him, then they are a battle in the demonic that is going to try to trip us up, and that is exactly what happens here in the story. As Pinocchio is heading to school, he gets tripped by the fox. The fox sees him, is going to exploit him. Him and the cat are going to exploit him, so they make a plan, and so they go around, get in front of him, take the cane, and trip him up. Well, the first thing that they're going to do is what we see with the fox and the cat is they are undermining the very system of school itself. Even before they see Pinocchio, they're laughing as the children are going to school, and that's what they're out there doing, trying to find somebody they can manipulate. And then they see this wooden puppet that looks like a gold mine to them, but they are undermining the very structure that the children are going to. They're laughing about school, but then you see that all they are a bunch of idiots. I mean, just that's what they are. They're not smart because they're laughing at school and undermining those children going to school. But whenever he trips Pinocchio and he picks up his book, he's acting like he's reading it. He said, "Oh, a scholar I see," talking about Pinocchio. And he's reading the book, but the book's upside down. Well, he shows it to the cat, and the cat, it's upside down for the cat too. Afterwards, he was trying to tell Pinocchio, "You're going to be a big star. Your name up in lights." He said, 6 foot tall. And he said, "What is your name, son?" "Pinocchio." He said, "See you there, P-I-N-U-O." And he's like, "Well, never mind, we got to get on." But the point is, he can't spell Pinocchio. He can't read the book, but he's laughing about the system that there is going to try to help other people. As me and you are trying to do better, and as we try to move in the right direction, we are going to be met with these people out here, all kinds of people that are going to try to undermine everything that we do. And you got to realize that the whole story of Pinocchio is that he is met with each character that he comes, as he progresses, as he is maturing, each character that he meets is stronger than the character before. By the end, he's facing this monstro, the whale. But as he goes on, then he meets the coachman and that coachman is a very wicked, evil thing that hides it very well. Before that, it's Stromboli, who is stronger than the cat and the fox, and then the fox are the low on the totem pole. But he is progressing, as he progresses, he's meeting these different characters, and each one's stronger than the one before it. But the first one he meets is this fox and this cat. Well, they're a bunch of idiots. They don't understand anything. They think they're smarter than everyone else. And how many people have we been around like that? They don't understand anything, and they think they're smarter than everybody, and they think they can manipulate people, and they don't realize their own foolishness. You know, it's so easy to pick at the problems of other people. And so the first thing they do is they trip up Pinocchio. They trip up this little naive creature and convince him to be an actor. Well, why are they doing that? Because they're undermining everything that's around them. Don't mean to be political with that, but look at the world we're in right now, because that is exactly what Satan is doing. Is he is undermining all of the systems. He's undermining the history, our history that we have, trying to tear down the statues and tear down everything that represents the past. Well, we got to be careful about that. Again, I'll use the quote by G.K. Chesterton, who said, "Before you tear down the gate, make sure you understand why the gate was there to begin with. That gate may be there for a reason. And before you tear it down, you better find out why it's there." And so a lot of people, they want to tear down everything in society, and they don't understand the importance of that. They don't understand that this is the culmination of thousands of years of human history that has put those institutes in place to produce a society that we can live in now, to have some freedom. So they're trying to undermine everything. So the first thing the cat and the Fox are doing is they're trying to undermine the whole school systems, and you see that with a lot of things. I mean, we've been in a pandemic for the last couple of years, and I know the pandemic is real, and I know the virus is real, but also at the same time, it has been a tool to undermine a whole lot of structures. For instance, the school. I mean, because the fox and the cat, they're mocking the school system, about the kids going to school. Well, look what COVID did. Last year, the kids might as well have not even went to school because they didn't, when you're telling kids, well, don't come, you don't have to come 2 days a week, and then if you don't want to come, you don't have to, and if you're afraid of this, and there was nobody learning anything. I mean, if there was very few, but it undermined the school system. Well, now this year, they're trying to reinstitute it, try to get all the children. I mean, where we're at, it may be different other places, but where we're at, they're trying to get them to go back to school. Well, they've already seen that last year that school didn't seem to be that important to people. So now it's hard to it's hard to enforce that now when you've already undermined the system. Same thing with the church. Last couple of years, churches shut down. When you shut a church down for weeks, months at a time, well, then when you try to open it back up, you've undermined that. We tried to keep the church going the whole time. I think we only missed 1 week and we done an online service because some of us had COVID and we didn't want to spread it, but it was only like a week in the whole time of the last 2 years. We've done outdoor services, we've done whatever we could because we did not want to undermine the importance of the church house. And so when you undermine those, it's hard to get people to take that serious when you've cut out when you've undermined the whole structure. And so you can do that in every aspect of life, and also the same thing with like addiction recovery. See, before I got into studying out addiction and things, I mean, I'd been, we'd all been addicts. Addiction and sin, I believe, are interchangeable, but I didn't realize how important it was to have groups. I didn't understand how important it was to have these groups that you could go to, or to have these social networks where you could talk back and forth. I didn't understand that. And I used to maybe I had that fox mentality toward addiction recovery because I would talk about like Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't understand it. So see, when you don't understand something, then, you got to be careful about that. I didn't understand Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought it was just some secular organization that was taking Christ away from people, because I knew that it took Christ to recover, and I'll stand on that. But I didn't understand how much of that was Christ-centered or how much of it was centered on God. When Karina, whenever she finally gave me the big book, the Alcoholics Anonymous big book, and I went back and I read she was telling me the original, how important or how good the original book, the original edition was. So I went and then she gave me one book and I went and bought the original edition. And I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't understand. I didn't realize how much of that was centered on God and and biblical principles and you putting your trust in the right direction. I undermined that, and I shouldn't have. And so now when I look back, I realize that how foolish that was of me. I was like the fox picking up the book. It turned upside down, didn't understand what I was reading, or didn't understand what he was reading, but I didn't understand how important that was. So we got to be careful about that people do not trip us up and they undermine things that are important in our life, because we need the structure. A part of the quest to become real is you do need structure in your life. In order to be brave, truthful, and unselfish, well, that is an adoption of responsibility. Well, you need a direction. You need to, like Geppetto aiming at the wishing star, well, he's looking in the right direction. We need the right direction. We need to adopt the responsibility. We need to ask some questions why, and we need to move that way. But along that line, there are going to be those that will try to trip us up. And what they're doing is they're trying to tear down number one here, we see them trying to tear down the institute of school. So they immediately then began to tempt him, because as he's going to school, he says, well, I'm going to school. And so they pull him back, and then they start manipulating. It's like, well, why would you go to school when you can be an actor? Why would you go and have to subject yourself to this discipline, when all you can do is you can bypass that? And it's a danger, because that's what Satan will do, is he'll try to get you to bypass what you need to do to make it easier. And that's what they began to tell him. They talking about there's a easier way. It says there is, they call it the easy road to success. They're trying to get him to give in to this instant gratification, to this immediate pleasure instead of going the hard way. They're trying to tell him there's an easier way. Well, when you're a little naive puppet and the night before somebody else was pulling your strings, well, you're very naive. Then it's easy to tempt them. And I see that in Christianity. I've seen those that have come along and somebody's trying to do right, and you get denominations or things. They say, well, we called them before they really got started, and we showed them that this and showed them that. And it's like, okay, you want to boast about that because that's what the cat and the fox did. They act like they were smarter than everybody. And it's like, really, what did you really do? You take a young convert and you convince them that your way is better than everybody else's way. Well, what have you really done? All you've done is take a naive puppet and turned them into an actor. I don't want that. I say that time and again. I do not want that with the church. I do not want that in my ministry. I am not trying to get cult members. I'm not trying to manipulate and get people to where all they are a computer spouting out what I've told them. I don't want that. I want you to be able to think for yourself, move for yourself, talk for yourself, reason for yourself. That way, when you face the hardships in life, when you do meet your fox and your cat or your stromboli or your coachman or your monstro, you'll be able to handle that. You will be able to think for yourself in such a way that you're not tripped up so easily. So they're trying to tell them, well, there's an easier way. Instant gratification. All you got to do is do this, do that. Now, you got to be careful about that. That's as old. We've done it, but we talked about it before. Satan done that there in the garden, told Eve, well, he told you not to taste that tree, but really, if you'll do it this way, it's a lot easier. Well, you better be careful about things that are easy. Life is hard, life is suffering, and don't try to take the easy road out because it may be very dangerous. So you always got to ask the questions for why. But that's what they're doing, and they paint the picture for him. It's like, oh, your name up in like 6 foot tall. Everybody's going to be looking at you, and it's easy, and it's and they're not doing that to help him. They're doing that because they want to exploit him. And I see that. Again, I'm not trying to be political, but I see that in the world right now. It's like trying to hand everybody things on a silver platter. It's trying to hand out all this stuff, and especially the last few years, it's been one thing after another of handouts. And, everybody falls for it. I'm not trying to be political with this, I promise. But what I'm saying is you got to be careful about what's easy because they probably a sinister manipulation behind that. There's a reason why people are doing that. You got to be careful with things. You got to examine everything upside of the light of the truth. And so Pinocchio, his conscience was supposed to keep him in the right direction, but his conscience, Jiminy Cricket, the Blue Fairy has made Jiminy Cricket his conscience fell asleep the first day on the job. Well, because his conscience wasn't there, he was able to be manipulated. Then he was able, they convinced him to go and be an actor. Well, his conscience should have been warning him, but instead we'll override our conscience sometimes because we think it's easier. I preached on it. There's actually a message on it's politics, really. It's called the Esau Spirit, and if you're not into all that stuff, then you don't need to watch it. But if you want to have an eye opener, go back and watch that. It's called the Esau Spirit because Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of beans. A lot of people will sell out their life and their meaning to life and everything over something for some instant gratification, for some instant pleasure, and you got to be careful about that. So what the first thing that trips Pinocchio up on his quest to become real is these ones that offer him an easier route, and it's to his own detriment. As a matter of fact, what it does is it puts him in a cage, in a bird cage. Stromboli locks him up in a bird cage and tells him if he don't shut up, he's going to turn him into firewood, or when he gets done with using him, he's going to turn him into firewood. Pinocchio is screaming, asking, begging somebody to help him, and seems like nobody's hearing him. So because he took the easy route, it ends up putting him into worse bondage than he was before. So we got to be very careful about that. But he tells him, he said it's a easy road to success, they says. And then they begin to sing, an actor's life for me, an actor's life for me. They're entertaining him, leading him to could have been his own destruction. And so we got to be very careful about being manipulated in such a way. It doesn't matter how entertaining or how pleasant it sounds to the eyes. Again, or to the ears, what we got to do is we got to go back and ask the questions why. When somebody is trying to run down, okay, you're trying to get help. Somebody comes along and, well, why don't you do this? You can do this. Why don't you can get by with this? Well, you might ought to go back like we was talking about in the last podcast. Ask the questions why. Why are they doing that to you? Are they really wanting the best for you, or are they just wanting to undermine everything that you're doing? Some people don't want to see you do better. They want to keep you on their level or below you. They want to hold that power over you. They like to think they're smarter than you, that they know better, and that you're just a fool that can be manipulated. And as long as you stay as a puppet or an actor, that is all you're ever going to be. But if you'll move and adopt the responsibility and do what's right, you will surpass those people. But you got to be careful of those, because if you're an addict, there'll be somebody come along that knows you're trying to do better, knows you're trying to recover, and they would call you, and you would think that they are your friend, but they come along and offer you those drugs, trying to get you to go back, alcohol or whatever it is, the lifestyle, whatever it is. There's going to be somebody come along, and they are going to try to act like they know better than you, or they're going to try to tempt you with that stuff. And if you're not careful, we'll fall for it. And so they can paint the picture, and the devil does that. You imagine Lot's wife, fire and brimstone was falling on Sodom and Gomorrah, and yet she looked back and turned into a pillar of salt. God had told them, don't look back at that. When you make up your mind that you're going to do what's right, and you're moving in the right direction, and you feel like God is leading you in the right direction, then don't look back. Do not get sidetracked by anything. And there are going to be plenty of those that will come along and try to tell you it's a easier way. So what they do is they sell him this false bill of goods that being an actor would be the best life for him. Well, it's a natural progression to go from a puppet to an actor. Before we've been manipulated, every one of us has been puppets at one time where something else pulled the strings. We were under bondage, and so something else was pulling our strings. Well, then we realize we need to get some help, or we should be realizing that. So we're trying to move in the right direction. But if we're not careful, the easy route is to go from being a puppet where something else pulls the string to simply being an actor. And I emphasize that over and over and over. I do not want people to be an actor. I want them to be able to come and be who they are. Listen, I don't want somebody to come in and put on the dress and on all the clothes and act like there's no problems. What purpose is that? What purpose is it if I give you a set of rules and tell you if you live by them, then everything's fine. If you've not been born again, if you've not been turned into that thing, all you are is an actor. And I know some people would probably fault me for that. And they'll say, well, why don't you preach on this or preach on that? I'm trying to get them to the spot to where when I do preach to them about a way you have to live and act, and we know from the very beginning we got to lay the world down. But if all you're doing is just telling them, if you do this, do this, do this, follow this set of rules, it'll make you real, then if you're not very careful, what that does is it puts you into that cage like Pinocchio, because he tried to be an actor. Well, he went in and he surrounded himself by other puppets. Well, he looked good because he was surrounded by other marionettes. He was surrounded by all those on string. Well, he didn't have strings, and it made him look good, but he was still being manipulated. His strings was still being pulled, although not physical. They was still being pulled, and so he was nothing more than a glorified puppet. He should have been doing what he needed to do. He should have went to school. He should have kept his direction, kept going in the right direction. But instead, he falls for this. He falls hook, line, and sinker for this. I don't know how you explain it. How this false image of being a actor, of something that would be easier for him, instant gratification. And you see, as the story goes on, after the first performance, everybody loves him. He falls down. He makes a fool of himself, really. He's trying to sing this song, but he ends up falling. He ends up falling down, gets his nose stuck in a knot hole, gets up, and Stromboli's angry because he made a fool of himself. But then when he hears everybody laugh and he realizes, Well, everybody liked him, even though he's acting the fool. And that's what a lot of people do, is they're the fool. They act the fool, and when people laughs at them, then they just take that as people liking them. But that's not them liking them, that's them making fun of them. So he is, Stromboli then takes him in, and he's counting out all of his money. Stromboli's exploited him, and he's taking these big mounds of gold pieces. He gives Pinocchio a little old washer that has no purpose to it. Somebody had slipped one in. Instead of a coin, they'd put a little piece of iron or metal washer, and he gives it to him. It has no meaning to it, but Pinocchio's doesn't realize that it has no value. But the only thing he's worried about, he said, well, do they like me? Well, you got to be careful about that. It's got to be more than just do people like you. It's got to be more than worrying about what other people think about you. And I know we all need to live in a way to, that people can look at us and follow us. But that should not be your primary goal, is to be a people pleaser. The Bible says, I think it was the Apostle Paul that said, if I seek to please men, I should not be the servant of Christ. Another time, the disciples were going to be persecuted, and as they were being punished for being Christians, they asked the question, said, is it better to please God or man? You decide. And they were saying, of course, it doesn't matter what people think. Well, as Pinocchio has went from being a puppet to an actor, the only thing he's asking is, he was saying, does everybody like me? And Stromboli's like, oh, yeah, they love you. They love the fact that you're acting like a fool. They love the image of you. But all he is an actor on a stage. And if we're not careful, all we'll want is the applause of men, and we'll want people to accept us. And by doing that, we don't face our own reality and our own issues and our own problems and move in the right direction. It's easier to do this instant gratification and then only worry about what everybody thinks. You can preach easy message, bubblegum messages. I say that all the time. I can preach those, and everybody will like them. But in the end, if that's not what God's said to the church, that is all that's doing is all I'm doing is just simply trying to please people. And at the end, it doesn't matter whether or not I please people. It's whether or not I please God. In the end, that's what will matter with you. It's not what everybody else thinks about you. It's whether or not that you have pleased God, that you have done what you needed to do. The responsibility, have you adopted that? Because if you don't, Pinocchio is told three things that he's got to do. He says the Blue Fairy says you've got to be brave, truthful, and unselfish. Well, standing up on that stage, he cannot be any of those. He is not truthful because he is pretended to be something he's not. It's not brave to be an actor. It's not brave to only want people's approval. That's not brave. Brave is to stand there when everybody gets angry, whenever what you say does not line up with what people think. Because some people want to keep you in bondage. They want to keep you under them. They want to keep you under their thumb. They want you to fit into what they expect of you, and whether that be in any way. But you can't be brave, truthful, and unselfish like that. And if not, all you are is a glorified puppet. Somebody else is pulling the strings. If all you're seeking is the approval of people, somebody's pulling your strings. Because I've seen that. I've seen preachers that would preach. If there was a holiness place, they'd preach holiness, and because they wanted to please the people in the crowd. If they went to a more liberal place, they'd preach it that way. However, wherever they was at, they was these reeds shaking with the wind. However the wind blowed, they would go that way. Well, that's not being brave. That's not being truthful. And that's not being unselfish. You have got to adopt the responsibility, because if you don't, this is what happens, and this is what it leads to here, is he is put in a cage. But when he's asking, does everybody like me, this is Jiminy Cricket has came in. Of course, that's his conscience, and he has come in. He sees the performance. He sees him making a fool of himself, and at first he's embarrassed for him. Then when everybody starts clapping and applauding him, then Jiminy Cricket says, well, they all like him. And he was like, well, I guess there's no purpose for me. There's no purpose in a conscience if you're manipulated by everybody else around you. And that is exactly right. If you're manipulated by what other people think, then there's no point in having a conscience. Your conscience will teach you to do what's right. And even when everybody else is going one way, your conscience will show you to go the other. When everybody else, that you're at a place and everybody else is doing what's wrong, your conscience will tell you to do what's right. But if all you're doing is going to be an actor, Then you go to church, you'll put on that facade. You'll go right in. You'll fit in it. Nobody will know the difference, or unless, that you could do a discernment of spirit and know there's something wrong. But they'll go in and they'll dress the part, act the part, go to church, and you would think that they was just the most holy person in the world. But then when they leave the church, they could go to a party and they'll be right there doing the things that the world are doing, because all they've done is change costumes. They're still puppets being pulled by these invisible strings that all they're doing is trying to suit and fit in with everybody that's around them. Does not make you real. What makes you real is when you stand there. The Bible says, "Be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounded in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain." You've got to get a direction in your life. You have got to discipline yourself and take that responsibility. I had somebody ask me one time, they said, they saw the way even their own situation, they'd failed themselves. They'd tried to come to church, tried to do what's right, and cares of life, things like that had taken them out. Well, they asked me, they said, "How did you do it?" Because they knew me before, and they knew me after 12 years of this. And they was like, "Well, how'd you do it?" I said, "Well, it takes discipline." And I mean that. It takes discipline. Every day you've got to be disciplined, to have your marching orders, to do what's right, to be brave, truthful, and unselfish, and know what you've got to do. Pinocchio knew that. He knew he's supposed to go to school. His father had told him, and his father said, "You've got to go to sleep because you got to go to school and you got to get smart." The first thing that happens is a fox and a cat comes along, says there's an easier route, you don't have to do that, you can do it this way. And if we are not very careful, we'll fall for those tactics. We'll think, well, there's an easier way, I can do it this way. Listen, you better know what you're dealing with, because they are a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing out there that are trying to lead you to your own destruction. And when Jiminy Cricket sees that, he's supposed to be his conscience. Of course, he's late for the first day on his job, and so because there wasn't a conscience there, Pinocchio is led to be an actor. Then when it looks successful and he's not a success, it looks like he's successful, then he's asking, "Does everybody like me?" And he's already falling for that trick. Well, the cricket is watching the performance, and this is what he says. He says, "What does an actor want with a conscience anyway?" He said, "Everybody likes him. They like him." He said, "Well, what does an actor want with a conscience anyhow?" And it's a good question, because if that's what you are, why do you need a conscience? If all you're doing is being manipulated by everybody around you, and you know that if you get around people that they're going to be able to convince you, and there are plenty of people like that out there, that they'd better be careful about the crowd that they're around, because they have not become this real person yet, and they had better be careful about who they surround themselves by, because they'll be manipulated, and they'll put on this they'll become the actor. Something else is still pulling the strings. So he said, "Well, what does an actor want with a conscience anyhow?" And that's true. If all you're going to be as an actor, you don't need a conscience. If all you're going to be as an actor, then you can go to programs, you can get your certificate, but you're still in bondage. You're still a puppet. And we saw those that have failed, although they had all the criteria, they still failed, because they never matured into this real person, and all they was puppets, actors, putting on a performance, and there wasn't anything inside. So it has to come from inside. But because he was naive, he was led astray, and if we're not careful, we'll become very naive, and we'll be led astray by everyone around us. So he sold to Stromboli as an actor. He pretends to be this actor, and what it does is it's putting him into bondage. At the very end, just before the blue fairy comes down, which we'll get into that next time, the blue fairy comes down to turn him loose, because he's crying out, he's begging, crying, pleading. He's in this cage. So he's been the puppet, he's the actor, he's worried about what everybody else thinks, and whenever then he says he's going to go home, Stromboli has got him, he's bought him, and because he has been sold as an actor, he throws him in a cage, tells him to shut up, actually raises the hand like he's going to hit him if he don't shut up, and then tells him, he said, "I'm going to use you as long as I can, and then when you get too old, I'll turn you into firewood." Well, Pinocchio is in bondage. Because he has subjected himself to this easy route, to this easier way, because he bought into this, what does everybody think about me, and does everybody like me, and this performance that he's put on, well, now it's put him in bondage. So you got to be careful about that. Get your direction, your aim right, your direction right, move in the right direction, ask some questions why, understand that you need to go beyond being this, that there's not an easier route, that there's not this instant, be careful of this instant gratification, easy way out, move in the right direction, and everything will be good. So we love you, God bless you, and just be aware. Be aware of those things that are outside that are trying to cause you damage. So we love you. God bless you.